morning. I'm going to talk today about flipping bar prep, or in other words, utilizing the flipped classroom methodology in order to efficiently and effectively prepare our students for the bar exam. But before we get to that, I'd like to take just a second to look at a snapshot of legal education in 2015. And I would suggest that there are two significant trends, probably more, but two significant trends that are influencing legal education right now. The first one comes from the education field more broadly, and this trend is twofold. On the one hand, in an effort to reach millennials, we are increasing the use of technology in teaching, right? And similarly, relatedly, we are also shifting our emphasis away from teacher-centered learning towards more student-centered learning. And along with that comes with an emphasis on active learning and experiential learning and skills development, right? And so that's our first trend, the trend that's coming from the broader field of education or pedagogy. The second trend is what I'll call, for want of a better term, market trends that are influencing law schools right now. And this is not news to any of you guys, but we all know that the job market for new grads is grim, right? The most recent NALP study came out, this summer said that new grad employment rates had dropped for the 6th year in a row. Law school applications have declined precipitously, 37% since 2010. Also, the entering credentials of our new matriculants are slipping. At the high end, we have fewer and fewer students entering law school with high-end LSAT scores. And correspondingly, at the lowest end of LSAT scores, that number of students entering is growing even bigger. A recent op-ed in the Washington Post put it this way. So add to this current market forces that are operating on law schools, add bar exam pressure. Right now, bar exam pressure is nothing new. For years, most law schools have felt the need to increase their bar passage rates. But here's what is new. July 2014, bar passage. The largest drop in the mean MBE score ever. Also, passage rates were down precipitously in at least 20 jurisdictions. California down 7%, Texas down 11%, Tennessee down 12%, Washington State down 8%, Virginia down 7%. I could keep going. But the point here is that we are facing now more than ever an increasing pressure on law schools to in-house bar prep. Right? But again, this is not totally new. For a number of years, many law schools have been taking some sort of proactive role in preparing their students for the bar exam. This is a picture from Virginia, by the way. We have the charming habit or requirement now that our applicants still have to wear suits while they're studying for the bar, or for taking the bar, I'm sorry, while they're taking the bar. But anyway, back to my talk. So we have for years been doing something to help our students prepare for the bar exam. And even actually starting to offer academic credit for bar prep-oriented courses, right? About a decade ago, the ABA changed the rules, and now law schools are permitted to offer academic credit for what's mostly focusing on preparing for the bar. A 2011 survey showed that actually 41% of ABA-approved schools were offering academic credit for bar prep classes, and that number has only grown since 2011. A more informal review of law school websites shows that about 2/3 at least of law schools are doing some sort of in-house support for their students taking the bar. So as these, maybe we could call it first-generation bar prep courses, have played out, we've discovered some significant challenges in this in-house bar prep world. First of all, how do we deliver content, and how do we do so effectively and efficiently? How do we develop skills that are essential for success on the bar exam? Issue spotting, analysis, legal writing. And how do we effectively and efficiently deliver feedback to our students so they can know where they are and where they need to go in order to improve? Now, lest my talk seem too bar-focused, even if you aren't specifically engaged in providing bar prep services, I suppose that many of you may have faced similar challenges in your classrooms, right? How do we deliver content? How do we develop skills? And how do we give feedback that helps students and doesn't consume all our time? But the answer to these challenges, for bar prep in particular, may well come in the flipped classroom and other related technologies. So what is the flipped classroom? It really kind of boils down to a change in how we allocate class time, right? Flipped classroom focuses on moving content delivery out of the classroom and replacing the classroom time with activities that are meant to promote active learning and to engage students more actively in their learning. And it really is born out of the Bloom's taxonomy diagram. So in the traditional law school classroom, most of the time is spent on content delivery, which promotes remembering and perhaps understanding, right? The lowest level thinking skills on Bloom's taxonomy. Whereas the work that's given outside of class focuses on the higher level skills, analyzing and applying. This work is saved for home time when the student is alone, without teacher guidance, and without the opportunity to collaborate with peers. Another way of viewing the flipped classroom is from this diagram. So the traditional classroom, the time is spent with content delivery. The teacher lectures on the substantive material. Whereas in the flipped classroom, the content is delivered before class. The teacher records a video lecture, and the students watch it in preparation for coming to class. So those lower level thinking skills, content delivery, remembering, and understanding, are covered while the student is at home alone. And then in class, the teacher becomes more of a guide and facilitates student learning while students are engaged in active exercises and collaboration with their peers. Now, the flipped classroom model originated in the middle and high school educational arena. It's gained some traction in college level courses, and even a few innovative law professors have made some attempts or some dabbling in flipping the classroom. But there are two concerns, at least, that are articulated by law professors who are challenged by the thought of flipping their classroom. And the first one is that the law school classroom doesn't look like this. Right? The idea here is that most law professors don't stand in front of the class and lecture while students passively take notes, right? We say, no, we do Socratic dialogue. Instead of just lecturing, we engage our students in a dialogue. It's a back and forth. We encourage our students to probe the law, to analyze it, to apply it, to critique it. And that dialogue happens in classroom, and it's not simply a straight lecture. And that's a valid point. And the second one, and I'll come back to this in just a second, but the second concern or impediment to flipping in law school may be maybe less of a pedagogical concern and more of a practical one, but that is, well, what exactly do we do with classroom time if we're not doing the Socratic dialogue, right? What are these, or how do I create these exercises or activities that are going to facilitate my students' learning and actually use class time effectively? And I don't want to overstate my point, because I don't want to suggest that these two concerns, one, the value of Socratic dialogue, and two, the difficulty or the challenge in creating effective classroom exercises. I don't want to suggest that either one of those are reasons not to flip in a traditional classroom, law school classroom, or that they're even good excuses not to flip, right? They are obstacles that can be dealt with. But today I'm going to focus on bar prep more specifically. And in bar prep, neither one of those challenges presents itself. In other words, by the nature of what we try to do in preparing our students for the bar, it may be a perfect union with flipping. Now, here's some tips. How do we flip? That sounds great, but how do I do it? Here are some tips for you on if you're thinking about flipping, whether it's bar prep or even in a traditional law school classroom. My first suggestion is start small. Right? Sometimes people feel like they need to dive in head first and flip an entire classroom, and I can tell you from observing other people that can feel like you've bitten off more than you can chew. So start small. You can flip just narrow, discrete parts of your class, and particularly if you're not doing bar prep kind of stuff, maybe you flip the stuff that is more introductory or more dry or doesn't really lend itself to a rigorous Socratic dialogue, right? The second point is low tech beats no tech. And as I was preparing for this conference earlier this week, I was kind of lamenting my JV PowerPoint presentation. And then I thought, you know what? This is actually a good role model. You don't have to be a techie in order to flip, right? You don't have to be a tech guru in order to use some of these tools. And you can start with low-tech options for flipping. For example, many people who are dabbling with flipping or first experimenting prepare their pre-class substantive lectures by using narrated PowerPoint slides. Right? So if you've ever created PowerPoint slides for your class, you use the same exact technique and you just record your lecture over the computer screen while the PowerPoint presentation is going on. It's a very easy way to flip selected portions of your class. You can also create podcasts. You can use the built-in camera that's on all of your laptops I see out there to record yourself lecturing in your office, in the classroom, but it really doesn't have to be super fancy. Another related point is keep your content lectures, your video lectures that you're flipping outside the classroom, keep them short, right? 10 minutes is the general wisdom. They shouldn't be any more than 10 minutes. And try to be as engaging as possible. Again, if you're not super techie, you can do it by just using inflections in your voice. Right? Things like that we're used to as being teachers. And then the last point goes to accountability. Like, how do I make sure students actually watch these lectures that I have bothered to record, right? And there's a couple different ways you can do it. One is, if you're using a classroom management system like Blackboard or Twin, you can actually track student watching. Now, you don't know that they're actually paying attention. They might have just turned it on, but when they're sitting in your classroom, we don't always know that they're actually paying attention. But another idea that I think is even better for a lot of reasons is to use quizzes, right? So you can assign your students to watch a certain lecture before class and then give them a short quiz to ensure that they have actually watched the lecture and internalized the material. And that technique is good for a lot of reasons. Not only does it increase accountability, but it also goes towards this active learning, right? So we are giving them immediate feedback, immediate formative assessment as to whether they have actually learned what they needed to learn from their video. And interestingly, I think we talk a lot about assessment and feedback and how we want our students to know as the semester goes along whether they're actually learning what they need to learn, right? But the beauty of this approach with a pre-class recorded lecture and corresponding quizzes is that not only does it give the students feedback, it gives us feedback, right? We find out what our students are learning and not learning, and that gives us feedback as to the way we're teaching and what we might need to emphasize more. Then tips for classroom exercises, and here again is where, if you're in the field of bar prep, it makes flipping so much easier and more attractive because we have built-in classroom exercises available to us. They're already out there. You can use multi-state bar exam questions in the classroom, and you can use, for one thing, you can use the student response system or clickers where the students do the questions and then click in their answers and they can see what the class thought about a question. They can see where they are relative to other students in the class. And just that sort of visual stimulus, I found, really keeps students engaged too. And you can also use MBE questions as a platform for small group discussions. So break your class into groups of 3 and ask them to work through MBE questions together. Then you have students teaching each other, students really not just picking A because it looks good, but actually trying to articulate why they think A is the right answer, which promotes their understanding dramatically. You can also use bar exam essay questions for your classroom exercises. Again, small group discussion of exercises, of essay questions. And I love this one, you can use essay questions to do self and peer grading in the classroom. And this is beautiful for a couple of reasons. One is that it helps you as the teacher provide more feedback efficiently, right? Because the students are doing some of their own grading, and it makes your workload more manageable. But also, if you've ever graded essays, well, you'll have. Of course you have. That's why you're here. If you've graded essays, you see that in order to explain what's right and what's wrong, you have to understand the material really well yourself. And so by requiring students to engage in self-grading and peer grading, not only are you saving some time on your end, but you're greatly deepening their learning and their understanding of not only the content, but also test-taking skills. So finally, to conclude, I just want to suggest that at the current place where we are in the market in legal education, it's more important than ever that law schools take some responsibility for preparing our students for the bar exam, and that we do a good job of it. Right? And if we utilize the flipped learning platform, that may make a small bit of difference. It's not going to solve every single challenge that law school is now facing, but it's a good step in the right direction. Thank you.